What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of a corset? You may be thinking of the garment itself, both old or new, or perhaps the ideas that surround it. And what if I narrow it down to just the 1700s? What kind of ideas pop into your mind then? Hi, my name is Allie, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the history and adaptation of corsets and stays. But what exactly is a corset? Corsets are stiffened fabric garments with bones made of various materials that's worn as an undergarment or occasionally an overgarment that laces up in the front, back, or on both sides to help achieve a particular shape or silhouette. Then what are stays? Well, stays are the predecessor to the corset, but are commonly used interchangeably under the same term of corset in current times by people who don't know what they are. The idea of the corset as we know them didn't come until the late 18th century. But why did women wear them? Well, corsets and stays were not only worn to give the wearer a certain shape, but to support the breasts and straighten the back. The first corset-like piece of clothing shows up around 2000 to 1600 BCE in Minoan culture. Found in Crete, Greece, snake goddess statuettes were shown depicting women in corset-like garments. This piece of clothing was shown to be worn around the waist and under the breast for potential support. It also shows what looks to be a bone-like structure around the rib cage area, followed by a tight belt worn around the waist. Jumping forward, the first stays were created somewhere between the 14th and 15th century. They were stiffened, laced bodices with brass bone supports in them. But they didn't really become more widespread until a huge influx of stay-wearing blossomed in the 16th century, caused by the Italian-born Queen of France, Catherine de' Medici, who banned women from having thick waists at court. This decree caused noble, wealthy women to take on stays to achieve the socially desired silhouette for attending court. Going into the 17th century, stays were now made of stiff linen and boning was made of reeds, bents, or the popular whalebone. Going into 18th century France, the popular silhouette at the time was a narrowed back, wide front, and shoulder straps that would pull the shoulder blades down and back, causing the chest of the wearer to become more prominent and the posture to be upright and straight. An example of this can be seen in the 1730-1740 corset from Lacma. This particular silk corset is shown to have an intricate floral wet float pattern with front and back lacing that could be adjusted. The bottom of the corset is also important as it shows the padding on the waist that it was used to both give the illusion of a smaller torso and to bring more attention to the chest. It also has the separated pieces at the bottom of the corset that would spread to make it more comfortable around the hips. Over the century, the desired waist moved steadily upward, starting with a low waist at the beginning and a higher one near the end. In French society, the corset was a symbol of wealth and aristocracy. A corset that was heavily embroidered and lavishly decorated would have cost an enormous amount of money. Only nobles could afford such a luxury. Furthermore, a corset made a woman far more reliant on others. As corsets laced up the back, a servant would be needed to dress and undress each day. Lastly, a corset was a sign that a woman did not work. A corseted woman could hardly bend over and pick something up off the floor, let alone perform manual labor. Wearing a corset broadcasted to those around you that you were wealthy and that you did not need to work. A short excerpt from Society, Physicians, and the Corset. In the latter part of the century, around the 1770s, tight lacing started to become more popular. But what exactly is tight lacing? Well, tight lacing was when the corset was used not only to support the bust and give the desired shape, but to also bring the waist in further for aesthetic reasons or for the clothing to fit better. This phenomenon was controversial both in the past and now, as it could cause some major bodily harm to the wearer. But the idea of the corset lives on in the 21st century with garments like waist trainers and various other forms of shapewear. Waist trainers are commonly noted and sold as a corset or workout corset. One corset that I found on the website Hourglass Angel was the Rapid Fit Band Lacing Corset. I find this corset to be particularly interesting due to the similarity to the Minoan corset as it has the added belt around the waist. Another one I found was the zipped up and snatched workout waist trainer that many people are used to seeing due to celebrities like Kim Kardashian. Another form of modern corset is seen in lingerie. Due to stage performers using corsets in their costumes like Lady Gaga and Madonna, the connotations around the corset have become more hyperfeminine and sexualized over time, whether it was meaningful or not. Media portrayals of 18th century corsetry and stays accuracy varies depending on where you look. 3 examples of this are Disney's Beauty and the Beast from 2017, Dangerous Liaisons from 1988, and Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl from 2003. First, let's look at Belle's yellow dress from the 2017 live-action remake of Disney's Beauty and the Beast. Though the film is set somewhere between 1765 and 1777 in France, Belle's dress, which in context would be expensive due to the beast's aristocratic level, lacked the boned under or overgarment and instead stood alone. This is shown by her side silhouette because if she had been wearing the proper corsetry, her chest would have been flatter and in more of a downward angle toward her waist. Next is the film Dangerous Liaisons, which covered the use of corsets and stays quite well. As the opening sequence plays through, we watch a wealthy woman and her maids help her into her corset/stay. It even shows her being stitched into the dress, which was common for French aristocrats at the time. Finally, there's the interesting case of Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, with Elizabeth's corsetry. At the beginning of the film, when Elizabeth is first putting on the corset given to her by her father, an aristocratic governor of Port Royal, she remarks how women in London must have learned to not breathe, while her attendants help her put on her corset. One must note here that she's more likely than not being tight-laced into this corset, which would cause the shortness of breath that she comments on. With this, the corset is fairly accurate in this scene, as when she's being laced in on both sides by her maids, her shoulders are gradually being drawn back and her shoulder blades are coming together. As I said earlier, the 18th century corsets and stays were used to achieve this along with opening up the chest and giving an upright posture that Elizabeth is shown to have. Further into the film, Elizabeth claims that she can't breathe and faints into the ocean. It can be assumed that tight lacing her into the corset caused her to faint as the boning restricted her diaphragm and caused a shortness of breath. If Elizabeth, who hadn't lived wearing a tight corset, suddenly started wearing one that was too tight, it's easy to understand why she would have fainted. But the issue with this is that it was never explicitly stated that she was tight-laced into the corset, therefore feeding into the controversial subject of if corsets and stays caused health risks to the wearer. Regardless of controversy, corsets and stays are a part of fashion history that have a strong hold in modern times. They have been able to hold on this long due to their adaptability to the ideals of the time and the place they are in. Thank you.